Videos on how to convert a text file into a database and how to take all the text from the one side and put it into the database using Java Netbeans. The first thing that you're going to look at is you're going to look at the structure here. Here we have, I wouldn't know how to pronounce that, Sanford marrying Maggie Sosa. So these are marrying. So these are two different persons. So you don't want to have these, you want to separate these because you want to have proper normalization. So a person would be one entity, and then this is when they get married, and this is information about marriage. So they, on this 2016-11/05, someone got married, these two got married in garden, in the garden at, and there were 84 guests. So technically you're wanting separate fields for that. So you would want a person field, you would want a marriage field, and you potentially would also want a area field, because you have a garden, you have a lake, you have a so forth. So you might also want an area as a different table. So you would design your table by creating those different ones. So you would want firstly the actual person. So person ID, which would be, I'm just going to make an order number, it's fine. You might want to make the ID number their physical ID number, but we don't have, we didn't store the ID numbers. Now also what I don't like about this is that's stored full name, but we realized that you would want to separate it into first name and surname. So in your database you'd want to do that. So we would want to separate it out using when we do read from the text file, we would want to separate those two things out. So that is what we would want, and we're going to call this the person table. That's not how you spell person. So you're going to create it as your person table, and you're then going to have I'm going to create another table, and this would literally just be a venue, and I'll just have that as a primary key. You might want to add more details at a later stage. After you've got, from what text you've got, you can add more details at a later stage, and this would be the venue table. Okay, and then the next thing you actually want to create is the wedding table. So the wedding table would then be the wedding ID. Again, this could be a auto number. In a text file, it's not required that a field is set as a unique identifier, but in a database, it's important that each individual wedding is able to be uniquely reasoned or uniquely identified. Otherwise, basically, if you're looking at this text file, how on earth would you actually find an individual wedding? You'd have to say this person married this person, and potentially you'd even have to include dates. You'd have to include 3 different fields, because potentially they'll want to renew their wedding vows, and they might come back to the same location or the same place to renew their wedding vows, and then you can't have those as a primary key. So nothing in here unless you combine everything. Well, at least everything from here downwards. And who knows, maybe they would want to have 2 weddings on the same date, one for work friends, one for friends, or one for family. So I mean, there's no real unique identifier in here. So you can create a unique identifying field, and then in which case you would have a person, I want to say person 1, but I'm sure there might be a better way, husband and wife, but also now gay marriages, so I would maybe just go person 1, person 2. So and then what you can do, short text and person. Now it wouldn't be short text; it would be number 1, because it's referring to the person ID. So this is actually person 1 FK, because it's referring to who is marrying who, person 2. So that's what's getting married. Now you can also do this to make your life easier in database. You can do a lookup, and you can look it up from the table person, and you could store the ID and show the first name, for example, and surname. And that way inputting more data might be easier. Just make sure you don't, I wouldn't hide key column, just so you know that the ID is what's being stored. The reason why I wouldn't, I would do that, just make sure you don't, so this is actual wedding. Now, the reason why I would do that is so that later on, if you have got people in there, you can fill more data easier on the database side just by selecting the people there. But you must just make sure you don't enforce referential integrity, because that could cause issues in the communicating from Java. But the same thing could be done here, just for argument's sake. We're just going to do that quickly. And this will just set up all fields. Oh, I didn't hide that column. Yeah, so you'll see it will make it is a number data type, and the reason why it's a number data type because it's referring to the person ID. Then you'd still have, and the other fields that we would want is we would want the venue FK, so which location they're getting in, and this would again also refer to it would also be stored in number data type, because we're looking it up from the venue field. I like, because the venue was literally just the name. So it will be a text. Okay. And then the next one that we would want is the date of wedding. Now this might be a little bit more tricky because the date of wedding will be stored as a date data type. Now this will also help you in future from a text file, because in a text file it's not stored as a data type, it's stored as it doesn't really actually have a type. So you might have it a little bit trickier. So whereas here in Access you can, or in any databasing system, you can specify exactly what it's got. So in this case now the next step that we're going to do is we're going to then create the what's the last thing that we need? Number of guests, right? So the guests would be a numerical value. So you must design your database. You might have more fields that you potentially couldn't fill from the text file. So for example, in the person one, we might have another field like cell number or something like that. So it might be additional fields, in which case that you just have to input at a later stage, and I'll get to that later. Okay, so we've got our database set up, and we've got our text file set up, and both of them are in the same location within my project folder, so I can work with it. So inside my main, we need to firstly create an instance of my storage manager. So following the database connecting to a 2017 or accdb database, I'll put a link in the video caption below how to connect to the database. I do have my storage manager which will work with my database connection. Now technically, with this being a storage manager, I could also make this being to read I could also deal with reading from my files from here as well. So my text file I could also put into here so that it's grouped together, because this is the storage manager. So for example, I could have a private scanner file, sc file. So this is where I would store my my scanner for my file, and on the opening up I would now receive a connection to my database name, and I could receive a connection to my text file. I'm actually going to duplicate this connection because you might not always, only once when you're dealing with this conversion would you want to have that. So I'll duplicate my constructor, and this constructor I'll also initialize my file. So for my file, I'll go file f is equal to new file, and I'll use the string path name, which will be file. I should really give it a better file, Control R, just to make sure that we don't get confused between file and that. And then we would open up our scanner file to equal to new scanner, and we'll then scan through the file f. We'll then use our, and you'll see there's a red underline because this will throw a different exception. This is a file not found exception rather than a class not found exception. So we're going to throw this, and that will then this will now throw two different types. That will initialize here, and then what I can do is I can create a record here saying public string get next record. I don't know if I could add it from file, and then this would then return sc file dot next line semicolon. Now the problem is there might not be a next line. So what we can do is we can actually enclose this in an if statement. So we can go highlight this and go enclose an if else, and we can say if sc file dot has next, then do it, else throw except new exception, and then we can say no more, or we can do a throwing in an exception as well, or what we can do is if you don't want to throw the exception, which is also possible, you can also just return null, which is probably a better scenario, because now the string will just be a null value and then we can handle it here, because technically it's not really an exception. We expect to get to the end of the file, if that makes any sense. It's not so we can work with either of those. So now we're working inside our main, and in our main we can now take a look at what we need to do. Now I'm going to break it down a little bit further. We're going to say, okay, public void add person string person, and in here I'm wanting to add a person. Okay, now we know we're going to receive it. If we look at our wedding thing, we're going to receive it as a first name, surname, and we want to separate them into first name and surname and then get that through to the database. But we'll work with that just now. Same thing with that, same thing with this. We would want to work with those. Now the big thing here, when we add a person, right, Chiquita Sanford, when we add that person, we would need to know what their ID is, because obviously the ID we would then need to say this person married this person, if that makes any sense. So we need to keep track of that. So we go into our convert to text file and we go, this would not be void, this would be int if we want to return that. So we would go, firstly, how would we actually separate first name to surname?
A space.
Okay, so what you can do is you can go int pos, so this is the position of the space, is equal to person dot index of, and we want to find the index of the spacebar, and that'll get the position of the spacebar, right? So string first is equal to person dot substring from position 0 up until position index pos -1 maybe. That I'd have to check. So like you would do a trial run first of just printing the first name and surname out before you sort of work with them. Now, I'm going to do that because I'd rather make sure I'm getting the first name and surname right before I actually write it to the database. So then I'd go string, that's not how you spell string, just in case you're wondering, surname is equal to, and then you'll do person dot substring, and now you just go from position pos, perhaps +1. So you might want to exclude it, but I don't know which way around it is. So I'm just going to literally here start it out for first, full colon space, plus first, and then plus surname, and then full colon space, plus surname. Okay, and then we would return -1 just because right now I'm just testing this out. So now here we're going to have to, firstly, we have to create an instance of our storage manager. I know I'm jumping around a bit, but you would have to create all of these. Yeah, I'm jumping around, but whatever. So we're going to create an instance of our, of our storage manager, which is not there right now. There it is, stman, semicolon, and we are going to initialize our storage manager down here. Now we have to create the string for our text file and for our database. So our text file is called, so we go stman dot stman, capital M. What? Oh, it's static, that's why, idiot. New main course.txt. Okay, so we're in our constructor, which is now not static, so now we're running in an instance, whereas previously I was running in a static. So because it was static, I can't refer to specific instances. Now we're going to actually create an instance of ourselves. So I've got new, so now I'm creating an instance of myself. Do you get that? Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to literally go and say, okay, so stman dot equals new storage manager now. Okay, now we're going to use the database name and the file name. So the database name is weddingdb.accdb, and the file name is weddings.txt. So weddings.txt. If it's located in a separate location, you put the full folder path, the file path in that. And you'll see that this will come up with an error. But now we do want to handle it here because we don't have a GUI, so we're not going to throw it. We're literally just going to surround the block with a try catch. Now you'll see there's 3 different catches because it's catching a class not found exception, SQL exception, and that. Now one thing that I did learn in the last one that I was working with you is I didn't give different error messages. And it's important to give different error messages. So you got one here, this is class not found, and then just so you know that this was a type of exception, because previously it was actually an SQL exception, not a class not found, and I was thinking that it was my not connecting to the database error. So I was spending ages trying to look for why it was not connecting to the database. Meanwhile, it was actually an SQL exception. So I did something wrong with my SQL, not with my connection to the database. So this shows you if it's that exception, it's a connection to the database or to the text, to the database actually. Here it's a connection, it's a SQL issue with your SQL statements that you write, and here it's a text file issue. So you can actually figure out if you do different error messages on each one, you can figure out you can at least know roughly where the problem lies. And that's why it took me a while to solve the other one. File error. But you must always print out the EX so you can get what the message that came up there. Okay, so this will initialize the text file and the database connection, right? So both connections are now open. So now we're wanting to read from our text file. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go and we're going to say, we can either create a separate method going read from text file to separate out logically up, or we can do it in this. So I want to say public void read from file. Okay, I'm just separating it just so it's not inside all of the same thing. Read from file. Now in my read from file, I want to now read a line from the file. So string record. Okay, so this is next record. I can do y. Do you get that? So it's saying while the record is not equal to null, and then I'm just going to say, I could even do this. I could just go here, record. No, I'm doing this the wrong order. I can go here, record. Sorry, stman dot get next record from file. And now it's not equal to do that, and then at the end of it, I can do the same thing. So basically, as soon as I get the record from the file, it will check if it's null. As soon as it's null, it will stop looping. Do you get that? Now what I can do is I can run. I want to separate the person out of it, so I can go. The same thing we always do is we say we create another scanner, and this scanner will be our SC record. So this is scanning our record. Do you get that? And for this, we're going to say new scanner, and now we're going to scan our record. So it's the same thing as we do all the time, isn't it? But now instead of it being in the same location where we're doing it all at once, we're doing one in the storage manager where we're dealing with the managing from the storage, and here we're now separating it out. So now just so it's logically in its place where it should be. Do you follow? So now what we want to do is we want to get the person separated from that. So we need to, what is our delimiter? In this case it's a hash, because if you look at weddings, a hash separates my first person from my second person from my so forth. Do you get that? So the string person1 is equal to sc record dot next, right? And then what I could do is I could get here, we're going to add the first name and surname using add person, aren't we? So we're then going to run add person, and we're going to send through person1. You get that? We would then do the same thing for person 2. So now person 2 would be the next person, and so forth. Now right now, I'm just going to test this to check if my first name and surname are separated before I start adding it to the database. Do you get? Yeah. We'll do adding to the database after we're sure we're separating our records correctly. So we're first going to ensure we separate from our text file into just the print output, so we know that that's happening before we go and we add it to the text file. So if we run this now, we'll take a look at there. So let's go to the top. Chiquit. What is the actual? Let's go to the actual thing. Chiquita. Okay, so it's missing one letter. And then if we go to the surname, Sanford. I wonder if there's a space before the Sanford. That's actually worth asking. So I'm going to delete the space here, because I think there might be an extra space in front of the thing. So let's just change this. I'm going to go position -1, and here I'm going to say position +1, because I think there was an extra space in front of the. I think that's 2 spaces to me. Yeah, there's 2 spaces. So basically now I did it the wrong way around. I put -1 here. I should have said +1 here. So I just swapped them around. My bad. I should have known that actually. And now we go back up. Let's take a look at Chiquita and Sanford. So now it's correct. So cool. We got our person separation fine. So now let's look at our next text. Is the date. Now it should be able to take, the database might or might not be able to take the date in that format. So let's just copy it as it stands and see if the database would take that as a date in there. So what you can do is just copy it and directly put it inside the wedding, and see if you can paste it in there, and if it would pick up as being a date. Okay, it does. So that means that we should actually be okay. Now remember, just because I've added one record now means that if I now add anything else again, it'll now go to record 2. IDs will not necessarily be in sequence. I've had people get very irritated, oh, it's not in sequence, how do I get it in sequence again? Then you have to delete the column or the field and then re-add the field. It's not worth it. You don't need to. Just leave it. It doesn't matter if it's in order or it's not in order. It's a ID number. Do you know who's the person before you and your ID number is? I don't. Yeah. Okay. So now, the date data type is fine. So now the next step we want to do is we want to get the wedding. Here's the venue, so the venue can happen later because we also want to add that as a separate item. So it doesn't make so much sense in here because the venue only has a venue in it. At a later stage, you might want to add more fields, like you might have a description or something like that. So I'm going to leave it there. But yeah, so we want to separate the venue as well next. So the next thing that is in the text file is the date. So this is we're going to say, oops, sorry, I'm in the wrong spot. We want to be here. Let me close this so that I can see it better. Now we're wanting string date of wedding. Now remember, this should return an integer, right? Because this will be the integer. Oh, sorry, not here. When you add the person, it's going to return the ID of that person, right? So add person returns an integer. So now why is it showing red underline? Semicolon expected. Int O. Per P1 equals. Okay. Does this make sense? Because here it will add to the database and it should now return the unique identifying ID number of that person who we've added. The unique identifier of that person who've added. Do you get that? So both of these have a unique identifier of the person added. Then we've got the wedding. So the next step we need to do is we need to now actually the date of wedding. The next step is the venue. Okay, so string. Now the venue is the same. The venue name is the primary key, so we don't need to return anything when we get this, but we do need to go screcord.next. But we do also need to add that to the database as a separate entity. So we're going to say public void, because there's no, the venue name is the ID numbers, is the primary key, so we don't need to work with that. And we're going to add venue. So now here, this method's responsibility is to add the venue to the database. Does that make sense? But we'll get to that later. First, we're going to make sure that all of this is correct before we work with it. Does that make sense? So the next thing that we need is the number of guests. So int num guests, let's just call it guests, is equal to screcord.next int. Okay. Now we would then add this to the database. Now what we would do is we would come up with a string. So let's just go string. That's not how you spell string. SQL, and we would say is equal to insert into wedding. That's the table name, right? Value. Sorry, let's put it in the order of the things that we've got. So we have person 1. There's a capital, it's a small p, right? Okay, so just make sure you do the casing correct. So if we look at our wedding, it's person 1 FK, so capital P1 FK. So person 1 FK, comma person 2 FK, comma venue FK, comma date of wedding of wed, comma guests. You following this?
Yeah.
Okay, so we close the brackets, that's that done. Values, and now the values is going to be a little more tricky. We would first want person 1. Person 1 is a number, isn't it? So it would just be P1 plus, do you get that? Because P1 is where I would return that, comma, now we want P2 plus, comma. Now our next value is our venue. Now our venue is text, so single inverted commas, plus venue, plus close the single inverted commas, because remember single inverted commas is the SQL string, double inverted commas is the Java string. Now, so we're with that comma, the next thing that we need is the date of the wedding. Now our dates aren't closed in, hashtags, date of wedding, plus the next one we got is, so let's close it, so we close the hash now, comma, the next one we have is the guests, and that's a number, so we don't need anything, so we just got plus guests, plus close the brackets, semicolon. Whoa, freaking me out, man. Okay, so literally that there would have generated my my insert into the database thing. So you'd receive each individual one, and then you've now created an SQL statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start my SQL statement. I'm going to comment out my add person, because we know my person's that is correct for my person, right? So I can remove that for now. But now obviously each person is going to be -1, but I just want to check what my SQL statement looks like. So let's just press play. Whoop. Okay, so there's all my SQL statements. There's a lot of them, right? So let's go take the last SQL statement, copy, and let's go into my database, and then I go, let's just close all the tables, and we go create query, and design, close, move to SQL statement, and we paste it in here. Now that's the SQL statement I've got, and when I run this, it should add. Now you see here's -1, -1. Now unfortunately we haven't forced referential integrity, so it doesn't matter. We're not adding to the person, so it will just add saying -1, -1. It will allow it, but it's not going to make any sense. So if we run it, date of wed. Okay, so you see date of wed is unknown, so we know, okay, our database. This is why you don't execute it first. You don't add the people, and then your venue statement doesn't work properly. So you test each time you go along. So then when you do run it, it will run it for all of them and it will run correctly. So we go into now, so date of wedding is incorrect. So if we go to our wedding table, it's actually called date of wedding. My bad. Okay, so then in our SQL statement here, we change it from date of wed to date of, was it with 2 D's or 1 D? Yeah. Okay, so we save that and we try again. Run. I suppose I don't have to take the first one, I can take the last one. What's the difference? Copy. Nope, wrong spot. I was in here, wasn't I? Okay, so we go back to my query and we paste over this. Control V. So we run it again. Design, run. You're about to append 1 row. Are you sure? You can choose, you can go yes, or the fact that you see this message means that it is running. So we can just go no. Actually, let's just go yes. Let's just see. Okay, so if we go to my wedding now and I close my wedding and reopen the wedding. Reopen the wedding. You see there, the wedding's been added successfully. So we're happy with the fact that that works. So step 1, sweet, right? Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay. So now step 2 is we now need to go and we need to get our person working. So let's go to my add person. And now instead of printing out this, we're going to go string SQL is equal to insert into what's the person table called? Person fields first name, comma, surname, values, and then the values we've got are going to be single inverted commas because it's just text first, plus single inverted commas, comma, single inverted commas, plus because you basically, you're closing the one
and then opening the next one,
and then you're opening the next one, and then now it's the surname, and then plus and that's the only thing you got of the person is the first name and surname. So again, I would cite this SQL statement. So I'm going to say SQL Control S. I don't need the insert into anymore because I know that works, don't I? So I can comment it out because I know that one's working. So, wrong part. Comment this out, not the actual SQL. And then we run this and we check on what our insert into first name. So again, we run. I don't see any problem with that. I can't see it not running, but I don't trust myself. So again, we go Control V, we design run, you're about to pin one row, yes, you open up person, sweet. It did work, so let's just delete that person because we want to have two of the same person. So we delete that row, and we're happy with that. So we can comment out this assistant.out.println because we know that this works now as well. So now we go to our venue, and we want to do the same thing with our venue. So we go string SQL is equal to insert into venue, open brackets, venue, I think. Yes, with a capital V. Okay. Values. Good. Okay, and then what we would do is we would say, oops, no, it's wrong, isn't it?
Okay.
We need to input that. Alright, then sort that out. Venue. I just need to go SQL. Did I comment out the other SQL? Yes, I did. Okay, play. Table person row in count. Okay. Hello, Billy. By yourself? Anyway, okay, so my bad about recording a bit of that conversation. So the reason why this is, if it's giving this, it's saying table person into row count. Now, I don't know if we even ran the add venue, did we? No, we didn't. So what we didn't actually even run the add venue, which is why we just got warnings about repair of database. I've had that before as well. I think it's just versions and stuff. I won't worry about that. But moral of the story, run and add venue. So insert into venue values lake, right? Now, so let's run this. Control V, design, run. You're about to pin one row, yes. We close the venue because remember you have to refresh the data. I think it's probably a way you can refresh it up here as well. And lake, sweet, so lake did come, didn't it? Yeah. So we're happy with that. Let's just delete lake because we don't want to repeat it. So I'm not going to do this venue thing. The reason why is because obviously we'd have to add extra code here to make sure the venue doesn't already exist. And technically we'd have to do the same thing with a person, wouldn't we? So we would actually only want to add it to the record if that person doesn't already exist, or if that venue doesn't already exist.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a little bit more tricky, isn't it? Because there potentially could be two. Here in my weddings, there can be multiple garden venues. So I'd actually have to check first if it is not in the garden venues. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of ways to do that. I'm going to do a bit of a hack around it. A hack, it's just, I don't know how good it is. I'm going to create here string venues used equals semicolon. Now, basically what I'm going to do is only if the venue is not contained. So in my venues here, when I add venues, I could say here, I can close this with an if statement, and I could say if venue, I always forget which way around, dot is contained contains character sequence, string buffer. Okay, so basically I'm just checking whether returns true if and only if this string contains a specific sequence of characters. So if contains venue, not. So basically every single time, so when I obtain garden, so you saw previously if I look at my output, which I've forgotten how to open up my output, but if I look at my output right now, right, output, there's a function for that, but control 4, okay? There's, it repeats lake, it repeats garden, it repeats all of that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now in this case it should be contained in venue used, so it should only display garden and lake once. So only add it to the database once. and then but it would add it to the database every single time it is in that venue. It will add it to the database, and the same thing should go with person. But then if in person it will be a bit more difficult because you'd have to actually do a select statement from the database to find out if the person was already there, and then return the integer of that person. So you would actually go to your add person method, which is at the bottom here, and you would first run a select statement, and you would say select from where first name and surname is equal. So if it's not empty and there is a person with the same first name and surname, you would return that number or that ID number of that person that's already there. So the same person is getting married again, you would return that to avoid duplicates. In your scenario, it wouldn't matter because you've entered the text and whatever, so I wouldn't worry about it. But just for interest's sake, you'd do that, and especially in this scenario that I've randomly made up here, venue is an issue. So here I've solved the venue issue, I think, but I'm going to test it now to see if garden is not repeated 100 times and so forth. So if I run this now, garden once, lake once. So it will only show them individual times. So we actually only have a garden and a lake there.
Yeah.
Do you guys get that? But you guys, you. Alright. So now we go down here now. So far I'm happy with all my SQL statements on it. So now we actually need to start working with the database connections and actually start adding it to the database. So now I know in my first one, after I read from the file, I want to add this SQL statement, right? So we're going to go stman dot update. So to do an insert, you do an update. Now this returns an integer. This is basically how many records it did install. So for example, if you're doing an update, you might update 3 records, but an insert will always return 1. Technically, it could return -1 if it wasn't successful. So you don't actually really need to do anything with that return type, but you can if you want to. So that would run that SQL statement, right? But now this is going to throw an exception, so I'm just going to go, I don't want to deal with it now, throw it. So it means that it'll throw it into here, and it'll be caught by SQL area here.
Okay.
So it just throws it further. So we've got one place which is catching it. Alright, now the next thing that we're going to do is in our add venue, we would need to do the same thing, wouldn't we? So again, we stman dot update, and then we would run the SQL statement. Again, it's going to give me an error, so we just say throws clause, and I'll throw the SQL section. So technically it'll be thrown from here to this method will throw it from here to this method. So it's just a bit of a concatenation of the, or whatever. Alright, my terminology, that was pear-shaped. Now here we're going to do something slightly different, because int ID is equal to, now we're going to go stman dot update, and now there's an update, return ID. Now what that will do is it'll insert this new record, but it will return the ID that is given to it. So if 5 was given to that person, it would return 5. If 1052 was given to that person, it would return 1052. So it returns the unique number given to that entry that you've just worked with. So I'm also going to throw the SQL exception here, and then we will return ID. Does that make sense? So now, if we run this, okay, let me just make sure before I do run it that we've got everything. I don't want to half do everything. So we start from the beginning. We create our instance file storage manager. We read from file. The read from file will add a record of the wedding to the file. The add venue will add the venue of venue, and our person to our person. I'm going to get rid of the system.out.the print line, just so we work. What we might want to do is by the time we exit this loop while not equal to null, I might want to just print out a added to all records converted into database. Something, just so the user can actually know, okay, it's complete. Otherwise I'll kind of be running it and it's like, whatever. So we can just see. So let's check if it works. Are we ready? Dum, dum, dum. Play. Okay, now the warnings is fine. There we go. All records converted into database. Actually, I'll get to the bottom of why these warnings are here, but it tells me at the end, it says about repair your database. All will work fine, but it's better to repair your database. But something to do with the access and the way it's communicating with you can access. I'm not sure why there is. But all records are converted. So let's close all my tables and let's reopen them. Let's see what we got here. No, I don't want to say the queries. Let's go to persons. Nothing. That's not a good start. Venue. Nothing. Not a good start. Wedding. Nothing. Not a good start. Okay, so we actually have nothing that happened. Isn't that fun? Is this the same database that I'm working with? Yeah, must be. Oh, what the hell? Okay. I closed the database and reopened the database and now it's all there. Okay, so note to self, close database, reopen database. So you'll check their venue, Garden Lake, person is there, wedding, person 4, married, person, wedding ID 4, person 2 married, person 3, garden, date, guest. All works fine, right? All of them are in there. You've now not had to sit there and edit individually. And obviously we'll work for as many records as you would have. Cool, this actually took a bit longer than I anticipated, but it's now completely working and functional, and I think I went through it step by step.
Yeah.
Cool, goodbye.
Thanks.